Hey everybody, what is up? I'm Ivan Gomez, and this is the second episode of Code with Me. If you want to support this initiative, please hit the like button and subscribe to the web schools. I'm also accepting suggestions to feature on next episodes, so if you have a cool project idea, please leave it in the comments section. Now let me show you the project that we are going to build together today. This is a reactjs stopwatch. Super simple, but it's going to be a good opportunity for you to practice working with components, passing props between components, and also using the useEffect hook. So let's see how it works. We can press start and we see the text and the color of the button changing. Now the stopwatch is running. We can reset it while it's running and it's going to continue to run. We can also stop it, reset, then start again. So like I said, super simple, but a great opportunity for you to practice your skills with React.js. So let's go to Visual Studio Code so we can get started with this project. Let's go to File, Open Folder. And here I already created a folder for this project, so let's open it. And now I'm gonna go to a new terminal. Now let's create a new project, and for that we're going to need Node.js. So if I run node-v, you can see I already have Node.js. If you don't have Node.js, you can go to nodejs.org, download it for your operating system and install it. Then come back here and do the same test. Another thing that we are going to need is Vite. So again, if I type vite-v, we can see I already have Vite. If you don't, you can run npm install-g Vite, and then you can do the test I just did. Once you see the Vite version, you are ready to get started. So let's create a project by running npm create Vite. Now let's choose a name for the project. I'm going to type React-Stopwatch, and I'm going to choose React and JavaScript. Now the project has been created. Let me reopen the folder. I think it's better so we see only the files of the project. So File, Open Folder. We can see that the new folder for the project has been created. Let me start a new terminal, and now for the first time, let's run npm I to install all dependencies of the project. And now we can run Vite to run it locally in the web browser. Now you can control-click this link or copy and paste it on your web browser, and then you will see the project running locally. Now, the first thing we're going to do here is to clean up this project to delete all the default components and styles that come with it. Let's go back to Visual Studio Code, and remember that everything we're going to be doing here will be inside the source folder. So here we have the app.jsx. We can see here the Vite logo, the React logo, the age one. We are going to delete all that. So let's leave only this fragment, and I'm going to type React Stopwatch, just so we can see if this text is showing on the page. Now for this state variable, let's leave it as it is because we're going to need one for the time anyway, so we can just change its name later. Now I'm going to delete the React and Vite logos. Let's delete all the default styles as well, so going to app.css. Let's press Ctrl A to select everything and delete the whole content of the CSS file. The same thing for the index.css. In this case, I'm going to leave the font family. So let's just delete the rest and everything else below. And now we will be able to start fresh. If we go back to the web browser now, we can see that all styles and components are gone. We only have this React Stopwatch text. Now let me split the screen so we can style this thing faster. Let me close the CSS file, close the app.css. Now we need to think about the component structure for this application. Even working on small projects, it is important that you do that from the start rather than writing all your code inside the app component. So in this case, I'm going to go to the source folder, start a new folder for the components. And inside here, I'm going to create one component for the display. We are going to create another component for the controls. Now let's go to the app.jsx, hit Ctrl-A and Ctrl-C to copy the structure. Now let's go to controls, and I don't know if we're going to need useState here, so we can delete this, delete the app.css import as well, delete this line. Let's just type controls and adjust the name. So controls here and controls down here. Now let's copy everything and paste the same structure for the display.jsx. Let's just adjust the name. So display here and display here and here as well. Now going back to the app.jsx, let's import these components. I'm going to import display from components/display.jsx. Let's do the same thing for the controls. So first, I'm going to start an H1 for React Stopwatch. And now let's use the display component and the controls component. We don't need the closing tag, so let's remove them. Let's not forget to close it at the end of the start tag. We can save this. And now we see the H1, we see the display component and the controls component. We are making some good progress, so now let's add the content and the styles for these components. Now first, let's go to the index.css file. I'm going to remove the default margins and paddings for the body element. So margin 0, padding 0. I'm also going to add a display of flex so we can show the timer in the center of the screen. So display flex, justify content center, align items center, and we also need to set the width and height of the body. Let's add a width of 100 VW and a height 100 VH. We save this, and now we see the timer showing in the center of the screen. Let's also add that gray background color. So background color, Xcode is EEE. And we can go back to the app.jsx. Let me create a parent element for this. So this is going to be a section called Stopwatch. Let's place everything inside by selecting all these lines, pressing Alt and arrow up. Now tab to adjust the indentation. And going to the app.css, let's add that element. And let's add a background color. Let me change the colors of all texts to white. Let's add some paddings. So we can add 40 pixels top and bottom, 80 pixels on the sides. Let's also add a border radius of 20 pixels and centralize the text inside. So text align center. Now let's style the H1. We can add it inside using CSS nesting. So H1, I'm going to set the font size to 18 pixels, the font weight to 300, and I'm going to add a margin bottom of 18 pixels. Now, one thing I always like doing is going to the index.css and also resetting the styles for all the headings. So H2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So this way we make sure to have the correct alignment. Now let's start styling the display. So inside here, I'm going to add a section. Let's add a class of display. Now inside here, I'm going to add a div for the hours. Then inside, we're going to have a span with a class of number. so we can style all the numbers the same way. We can start this with 0, 0. Let's also add a label, which in this case will show hours. Now outside this div, I'm going to add a span for the column, and we can copy this structure for minutes and seconds. So this one is for minutes. And the last one for the seconds. Let's adjust the label and remove the column. We don't need it for the last one. We can save this to see how it looks. Now we just need to style these things correctly. Let's start a new file called display.css. Let's not forget to import it from here first. So import display.css. And now we can write all the styles for the display inside here. So let's remember we have a section with a class of display as the parent element. Let me set the font size to 80 pixels. A display of flex, a justify content of center. Now for the divs that are direct children of the display element, so for that, let's add the angle bracket symbol. So only for the divs that are the immediate children of this section, we are going to set the display of flex direction column. So we have the time and the label showing on top of each other rather than side by side. So flex direction column. Now here we have the labels, so let's add the label element and let's change the font size to maybe 16 pixels. Now this is much better. I'm just going to set the font weight for the time at 700, and for the labels, let's leave it at 400. I think the labels can be a bit smaller, so let's try 14 pixels, and this is now perfect. Now the styles for the display are done. Let's work on the controls. So going to the controls component, let's do the same thing here. Let's add a section with a class of controls. And inside we are going to add two buttons. One is going to be for reset. And the other is going to be the button to start stop. So I'm going to add a class of start-stop. Now we can start a new CSS file for the controls. Controls.css. Let's import it from here. And let's start styling these buttons. So first, I'm going to create a selector for that section that has a class of controls. Now let me add some margin top, let's say 24 pixels. Now inside here, let's add the selector for the buttons. Let's make their width the same, so 160 pixels. Let's make them round by using border radius of 80 pixels. I'm gonna add some paddings on top and bottom as well. 8 pixels top and bottom, 0 to the sides, and let's add some margins. Let's add 0 top and bottom, 12 pixels to the sides. So we see some space between these buttons, and this is starting to look good. Let's just remove the default border for buttons. So border none. And now this is starting to look good. Let's just add some different colors for these buttons. So end.reset, and this is for a button with a specific class of reset. Now for this one, I'm going to use a background color. Let me bring this Xcode. Now let's change the color to white, and let's do the same thing for the start stop button. So for this, I'm going to use a green color for the background. We're going to change it to red later when we start the timer, but we don't have to do this right now. Now I'm just going to add a cursor pointer to these buttons. So cursor pointer, Now we can see the cursor changing. I think this is a good UX thing. Let's also add a hover effect, which we can use the same technique with the and symbol and add the hover pseudo class. And here I'm going to add a box shadow. Let's add 0 and 0 for the X and Y offset, maybe 18 pixels of blur and 3 pixels of spread. And I'm going to add this nice purple color. Now we can test this out. This is looking much better. Let me just add a transition. Let's say 0.5 seconds. Now this is looking much better. So we are finished with the styles for the stopwatch. We can now start working in the functionality. So going back to the app.jsx component, remember we had a state variable from the start that came by default with the Vite project. We can use it, we just need to change the name because it's not going to be count, but time. So this is going to control the elapsed time of this stopwatch. We need one called time and one called set time. Now another thing that we are going to need is a state variable to control the state of the stopwatch. So I'm going to paste this. I'm going to create one called is running and the setter to set is running. And when we start the application, this is going to be set to false. Now, one thing I'm going to do here is the following. Outside this section, I'm going to add a p element just so we can show the state of the is running variable. Because the first thing we're going to do here is to start and stop the timer. So for this, I'm going to add the curly braces. And if we have is running, if this is set to true, then I'm going to show some text. I'm going to show running. If it's not, I'm going to show stopped. So this way we have the text showing down here. We're going to remove this later. This is just so we can check if everything is working correctly. Now let's create a function so we can change the state of the is running variable. I'm going to add a function here. I'm going to call it handle start stop. And inside here, we're just going to set it to the opposite value. So set is running. We're going to change it to whatever is the opposite. And for that, we use the exclamation mark and the current value of is running. All right, now when we click this button, we need to run this function. So let's go inside the controls. And here we have the start stop button. Let's add the onClick handler. And we are going to call a prop, which we can call start stop. Let's not forget to pass it as a prop of this component. We need to declare it up here. And inside the app.jsx, we also need to pass it as a prop, start stop. We are going to run that function. So handle start stop. We save this and now we can test. So start, then we see it running, stop, then we see it stopped. Now this is better. The only thing we need to adjust is the text and color of this button. So let's do this now. Let's go inside the controls.jsx file. Let me just break a few lines here. Let's do the text first and then the red color. So instead of showing start, we need to pass the current state of the stopwatch. So for that, we are going to pass the is running state variable. Let's go to the app.jsx and let's pass it as a prop here. So is running. We're going to pass the value of is running. Again, let's break a few lines. It's always a good idea so we see all the props we are passing to our components. Now this component is going to have access to the is running variable. And what we can do is to show this text dynamically. So here, if we have the is running set to true, then we want to show stop. If is running is not true, we want to show start. We save this. We can see it is stopped. We can start it. Now it is running and we can stop it. Now for the color, we're going to have to set a dynamic class. So for that, let me change the quotation marks to curly braces. So we can add a dynamic class we're going to use the backticks. So we can do string interpolation. Stop is going to be here anyway because it was the original class of this button. But now we are going to add another extra dynamic class. Let's use the $, curly braces, so we can add something dynamic here with JavaScript. We are going to test if isRunning is true. And if it is true, we are going to add a class of red. If not, we are not going to add anything. And let's go to the controls.css. And if this button, the stop button, has a class of red, we are going to add a background color. If we use color white, this is going to be a bit better. All right. Now we can see the color changing. Let me just refresh the page. This is how this is going to start. The button will show in green. The stopwatch will be stopped by default. And if we start it, then we can see that now the stopwatch is running. The button changed the text and color. So the UI is reflecting the state of the application, which is really good. If we click stop, then we're going to go back to the initial state. So we are making good progress. Now let's work on the timer functionality. I'm going to go back to the app.jsx and I'm going to change the value of the timer. Let's say 40 seconds. Now let's go to the display component and we need to pass the time. Let's pass a prop with the value of time. Now inside the display component, let's add this prop inside curly braces. And to start this test, I'm just going to show the time down here. We can see the number of seconds showing. One thing we need to adjust real quick is the following. If we have 5 seconds, we don't want to see 5 but 0.5. So we can easily do that with a function called padStart. Going back there, right here. First, let's convert this into a string. Let me just minimize this tab. So we are going to convert the time into a string, and then we are going to apply the padStart function. The first argument of this function is the length we want for this string, which in this case is 2. And the second is what are we going to complete this with? And in this case, we are going to add zeros until we have at least 2 digits. We save this. And we can see now this is going to show 0.5. This is a nice way of solving this kind of problem. If we go back there and we change this to 1, this is going to show 0.1 because we need at least 2 digits. And when we don't have 2 digits, it is going to be completed with 0 until we have 2 digits. Now, if we have 13 seconds, then we don't need to complete it with anything because we already have 2 digits. Now let's leave this, and now that we see that the time is showing, we need to create a function so we can actually start the stopwatch when we click start. So in this case, we are going to use the useEffect hook. So let's not forget to import it first. So useEffect. Inside here, we are going to add the function that we are going to run. And we are also going to add the array of dependencies, which in this case is going to be both time and the isRunning state variable. Now, whenever these values change, we are going to execute what's inside the useEffect hook. Now, once we go inside, we are going to create a variable for the interval. And if we have the isRunning set to true, then we are going to start an interval that is going to add 1 second at a time to the time state variable. We can do this with interval equals, then we are going to use set interval. Now the function we want to run and the interval time, which in this case is going to be 1000 milliseconds, which is 1 second. So at every second, we are going to call the setTime method, and we are going to add 1 second to the time state variable. We save this, we can put the time back to 0, and we can now do a quick test. I'm going to start the stopwatch, and we can see that the stopwatch is running. if we click stop, we can see that the interval is still running, which is not good. So we need a way to clear the interval. Let me just refresh the page so we don't keep seeing that. And the correct way to clear the interval here is with the cleanup function of the useEffect hook. And we add that function inside the return statement. So in the return statement, we are going to pass this cleanup function, which is going to clear the interval. Now we can save this. Let's make a test again. We start it. We can see this is running. And how come is this running if we are cleaning up the interval? This is because when the time changes, we go inside the useEffect again. We still have the isRunning set to true, so we set the interval again. But this time, since we are cleaning this up at every execution, when we click stop, we are going to stop the timer, and we can see that now the interval is not running anymore, which is great. Now let's see if we can resume the timer. So I'm going to click start again. Now we can see it's running. We can see that the timer is continuing, which is fantastic. We can stop it now. Now let's quickly work in the reset functionality, which is going to be quick. And to finalize, we're going to format the time so we can see correctly hours, minutes, and seconds. So let's go to the reset first. I'm going to create a function for this, which I'm going to call handle reset. This is going to be super simple. We are just going to set the time back to 0. Now going down here, we need to pass this as a prop as well. So let's break a line. Let's pass a prop called reset, which is going to call the function handle reset. And inside the controls component, let's pass the reset prop. And when we click the reset button, which is right here, let me break some lines here as well. When we click, we're going to run the reset function. We save this, we click start, we can see it's running, we click stop. Now let's try to reset. We can see it's going back to 0. We can start it again. This seems to be working fine. We can reset it while it's still running because this is completely independent. And now this is going to continue to run. We can stop, we can reset. So this is all done. And now we can already remove the state that we added to this P element down here because we know that everything is working fine. There's just one last thing that we need to do, which is formatting the time in seconds so it correctly shows hours, minutes, and seconds. In order to test this more easily, I'm going to change the initial state of the time. Let's check how many seconds we have in an hour. So I'm going to search for seconds in 1 hour. We can see we have 3,600 seconds. So I'm going to change this to 3,600. So we have 1 hour. I'm going to add 1 minute more. So I'm going to add 60 instead. And I'm going to add 2 more seconds. So 3,662, which means that if we format this correctly, we should be seeing 1 hour, 1 minute, and 2 seconds. So I'm going to save this. So let's go to the display component so we can create a function to format this time correctly. Let's go inside the display function, and I'm going to create a new one called format time. As an argument of this function, we are going to pass the time in seconds. We could just name this argument time, but for other developers that eventually will work on this project, it's a good practice to make it clear that we need to pass the time in seconds and not in milliseconds. Now here, let's get started with the hours, which we know that we can get the time in seconds, and we can divide it by 3,600, which we know is the amount of seconds in 1 hour. Now we are going to return an object in this function with the amount of hours, which we could do like this, but if we have the same name for the property and the variable for the value, we can simplify it like this. And now inside the number for the hours, we can just execute the format time function by passing the time in seconds that is coming as a prop, but we want just the amount of hours. We do this and we see something very strange. So let's go to the CSS file for the display. I'm going to change the font size to 20 just so we can see this number better. And now, as you can see, we are having 1.017222, which obviously is not what we want to show. What we need to do here is to round this to the lowest integer number. Because if we have 1 hour and something else, here we just need to show 1 hour and the rest is going to be shown in minutes and seconds. So coming back here, we are going to use math.floor. And now we show only 1 hour. Now let me just break a few lines and let me convert this into a string and add the pad start function. Now we save this and now we are seeing 0, 1, which is good. We can make a few tests. If we go back there and we change this to 3600, which we know is exactly 1 hour, we can save this. And now we see the hours showing correctly. If we have something lower than that, let's say 300,599, which is less than an hour, this number is going to be lower than 0. And since we are using the floor function, we are going to see 0 hours, which in this case is the correct thing to see. So let's go back to 662. And now we know that the hours are working correctly. So let's go there to do the minutes. Now for the minutes, remember that when we do this operation to get the hours, if we have more than 3,600 seconds, we're going to have some remainder of this operation. So let's make a quick test right here. Let's get the time in seconds divided by this number. And instead of using the division, let's use the modulus operator, which means that we are only going to receive the remainder. Now let me add the minutes to this object as well. And we can copy this part of the code so we can show the minutes. Now instead of .hours, we are going to show the minutes. We can save this and let's make a quick test right here. Let's say we are starting at 3,600 seconds. We save this, we do the division, we don't have any remainder. Now, if we have 1 as a remainder, we can see that we are showing the exact remainder right here. But this is not what we want because this is not 1 minute. We just have 1 second. So the remainder we are going to have is going to be in seconds, which means that if we divide it by 60, we're going to have the amount of minutes. So we can go back there and we can get all this and divide it by 60. So this is going to give us the amount of minutes. And we also want to do math.floor because if we have more than 60 seconds, then the rest of it is going to be shown as seconds. So we can save this now. And now we see that we have 0 minutes, which is correct. If we go back there and we add 59 seconds of remainder, we can see we still see 0 right here. But if we have 60, now we have 1 complete minute. So for the hours and minutes, we have it correctly. Now we just need to show the remaining seconds that were not accounted on the hours and minutes numbers. Let's go back there. Let's create another variable for the seconds. And here we just need to get the total time in seconds. We want to divide it by 60. So all we need to do is to get the remainder of this division. So if we divide the complete amount of seconds by 60, if there is any remainder, this remainder is to be shown in the seconds. So we do this. Now down here, we return the seconds. And let's adjust this down here as well for the seconds. Let's just change the name of the property, seconds. So now we can see this seems to be showing correctly. Let's just do a few tests. So if we have 0, we can go back to the display.css file and change the font size back to 80. And now what happens if we have 59 seconds? Now, if we change this to 60, now this operation is going to result in 1 minute and we are not going to have any remainder. This is why we are seeing 0 seconds. If we have 61 seconds in the timer, now we have a remainder of 1 in that modulus operation. Let me just test with 1 hour, which would be 3,600. We can see now 1 hour. If we add 4 seconds, we can see 4 seconds showing at the end. If we add 61 seconds, we can see 1 minute, 1 second. So now we know that this is working. We can go back to starting at 0, and we're now officially done with this project. I hope you enjoyed building this React Stopwatch with me. I know this function to format the time can be a bit complicated when you see it for the first time. So if you have any questions, you need me to clarify any of these points, you can leave a comment and I will answer you as quickly as I can. So that was all for today. Please hit the like button on this video and subscribe to the web schools to support this initiative. I'm Ivan Gomez and I will see you next time.